All right, so we are back for the final time for season two of the Last of Us, with episode six. Of course, Christian is back once again. You want to introduce yourself one final time this season of the Last of Us, Christian?
Yes, I do. My name is Christian, and I'm a teaching artist, filmmaker, and musician in the city. I make music under the name Black Norma, and yeah, it's great to be welcome back for another conversation on The Last of Us.
Yeah, we're going into the last two episodes of the Last of Us season two. Um, and yeah, of course, we're going to start with episode six, which was, again, before we start, actually, spoiler alerts for the entirety of these two seasons of the Last of Us TV show, but also all of the game, both the first game is DLC and the entirety of the second game. We're gonna get into future spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything about future stuff that's going to happen in the show based on what we know about the game, don't watch this. But yeah, getting into episode six, and as predicted, episode six was all flashbacks, and it was directed by Neil Druckmann himself, and also written by him and Haley Gross, who was a co-writer on the second game, and of course, Craig Mazin also wrote alongside them. But yeah, this episode opens with Joel as a teenager in the '80s. We start with a flashback within the flashback, and we get Joel and Tommy as children in the '80s. Joel being a teenager and Tommy being younger. How much younger? I don't know if we know exactly what the age difference between the two are in the game,
But
but the age difference between the actors in real life is probably comparable to the age difference in the game because Pedro Pascal is a fair bit older than I can't remember his name at the moment, but I always confuse him with the actor who plays Cassian Andor because they have the same last name. I remember I was looking up this actor and I typed in uh, the name of the actor from Andor, and I was like, "This is not
uh,
him. This is a completely
um,
different Latino person."
Gabriel
Yeah,
Luna.
Gabriel Luna, and yeah, Tommy's done something bad that we don't know, and Joel is gonna take the fall for him, and we get introduced to their dad, who's a police officer played by Tony Dalton, who I only know from Hawkeye on Disney Plus, but I believe he was in
Mm,
Breaking Bad and or Better Call
Yeah,
Saul or both.
yeah. One of my homies said he was on Better Call Saul.
Yeah. But he's also playing a character in Naughty Dog's upcoming game, Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet.
Okay. Mm.
Um, and yeah, in this scene, we kind of just we learn about Joel's childhood and how he's trying to be a better dad than his father was, who was also trying to be a better dad than his father was. What did you think of this opening scene?
Overall, thought it was indicative. Was indicative of a lot. First, it shows Joel's and Tommy's relationship, and Joel as an older brother and as a protector. Like it shows Joel in that role of being a protector, and that's always who he has been. Whether it's for Tommy or whether for anybody, he's willing to like actively put his body on the line for the people that he loves. And the it's no mistake that the first scene of the episode is Joel doing that for Tommy. And also we see, you know, again, the theme of The Last of Us being about parenting. There's a deep thread of parenting and also just patriarchy and being a dad and that being a common theme throughout The Last of Us. Like I feel like it's very frequent, but you understand where Joel comes from as a dad, as a protector, what he's coming from, and how it's led him to where he is now. And I think it provides a lot of context for how he shows up as a father for Ellie.
Absolutely. Um,
So yeah, and it was different. We've
yeah,
never saw
very
Joel
different.
young.
Yeah,
But I
this
think
is
yeah,
another one of those things where it's like we see things from a perspective in the show that we don't in the game because of the way the game decides to tell the story.
Mhm.
In the show, they're able to go further back into the past, into the '80s, and show a glimpse of Joel and Tommy's childhood, and why they are the people that they are today, and how that ties back into, like you said, the overall themes of parenthood, and like uh, Joel's dad tells him of like, what was the phrasing exactly? I hope you do a little better than me, and
Mhm.
that comes back later, which we'll get to. But I also wanted to mention, with Tony Dalton playing Joel's dad in this, and also playing a character in the games, uh, as well as Tatiana Gabrielle, who plays Nora.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't know this until afterwards, but Abby's actress, Caitlin Dever, played. Spoiler alert: have you played Uncharted 4?
Yes.
Okay, spoiler alert for Uncharted 4. Caitlin Dever plays Cassie, Nate and
Yes.
Elena's daughter. Um,
Mhm.
and in last episode of the Mustard Cast, I talked about how my dream is happening, where potentially the next Uncharted game is being made. Naughty Dog is working on another game, according to Neil Druckmann, but he is in more of a mentor and a producer role. So he's not directly making the game, which, like I've said, I'm not playing Intergalactic because I don't want to play a game that he touches or is like, the lead on. But having a game from
Right.
Naughty Dog, and it potentially being a game from one of my favorite video game franchises of all time, and him being more hands off, I'm so happy. It's like my dreams are coming true because I'm absolutely going to play
Yeah.
this if it's Uncharted. Even if it's not Uncharted 5, I'm going to play this. But hopefully it is. And, if, presumably, Uncharted 5 is going to star Cassie. And naturally, they're going to bring back Caitlin to play Cassie. And that'll be fun,
That'd
especially,
be interesting.
seeing how great she is in this, and them already having a working relationship. That could be dope.
That could be cool.
But yeah, getting back into The Last of Us. This whole episode is going through Ellie's birthdays from between the end of season 1 and where we are in season 2, starting with her 15th birthday. Um, and Joel goes to Seth in Jackson to get a birthday cake, and it's revealed that Seth was a cop, and that makes so much sense.
Yes, it does.
That makes
It
everything about his
lines up.
character makes so much sense.
Yes, especially in regards to how we feel about justice.
Yeah, it just made, like I said, a bit, bigoted. Not a bit, very bigoted. um,
Yes.
Not a completely bad person, but definitely still has some bigoted views in the this post apocalyptic world that ended in 2003. So even more
Mhm.
bigoted. We also see Joel's, craftsmanship. We get a little hint at that in the episode where Ellie's going through their house. That he does woodworking in his free time, and here we see him building Ellie's guitar, which is something we don't see in the game. Again, something that
Yeah.
they maybe could have potentially shown, but again, they wanted to get straight to the gameplay as fast as they could. But
Right.
there's a section at the very beginning we play as Joel, and they could have done a flashback where he's building the guitar, but they didn't, and because of that, we get that in the show. We get this great birthday scene, um, which happens after uh, Ellie is hopped up on drugs, on painkillers presumably, because she burned her arm in a very different way than she does in the game, to hide the bite mark that she got when she went to the mall, in the
Right.
Left Behind DLC, and that episode of the show. Um,
Mhm.
in the game, she does it with acid. Here, she burns it on a pot while she was cooking,
Yeah.
to hide the scar, so that she said so she could wear short sleeves again.
Hmm. Which,
And
but that was a cool detail and a way to lump it into that episode.
yeah, and then we, after the next day after she sleeps that off, we get the future day scene, him playing the guitar, singing the song, and they
Yeah.
just used Pedro Pascal's real voice, because I wasn't sure if he could sing or not. He can't, but
I feel like it works.
it works. It definitely works. Versus, Troy Baker, who can sing and like is in a band and everything. Um,
Right.
this here, they just had him use his natural voice, sing as best he could, and
Mhm.
with the backing guitar, it worked. I don't know if he can play guitar or not. I think if he could, they would have showed it.
Right.
You can always tell when someone doesn't know how to play an instrument because they will cut around it, and they
Yes, and
definitely
they'll do
they definitely cut
videos.
around it.
They did.
If a person knows how to play an instrument, they will show full body shots of that person playing that instrument. They did not do that here.
Mhm. Yeah. It was definitely like close-ups on the hands, face close-ups, back and forth, which and I feel like it worked enough where it wasn't jarring at all.
For sure, and a beautiful scene.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
it is a bit different than it was in the game. It still has the same impact, but in the game, it was him going to the shed that she made her home, and playing a guitar for her after he fixed it. But
Right.
it
And
works
all
just as well here.
right. And also, it's at a different point in Joel and Ellie's relationship, it seems like. Like, I feel Ellie is the same age as she was in the game when they had that scene,
No, I
but
think I, I'm
or
trying to
was she? Or was
remember. I
Ellie,
think
like,
she was a little
15?
younger there.
Oh, in the game?
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah,
because that
in the
that scene
scene
was
in
towards the beginning, and I think it was like
mhm,
it might have been like right after he came back from that patrol with Tommy.
mhm,
So she would have been
he was
like
right,
probably like somewhere between 15 and 17.
got you. But the way that it was played in the game, Ellie already was kinda antsy with Joel.
Yeah,
She already was like, "Hey, hi." Like, the way that they were talking wasn't the same as it was in the first game. It was they were already the distance was already showing itself a bit. Um, but I feel like in the show, there even though Ellie probably has a seed in the back of her head that Joel was lying, they were just kind of normal. I mean, I think Druckmann said, like, "This is the happiest they ever were,"
yeah, he
like,
did say
at
that,
this point. Mhm. So, I feel
and
like, yeah, they play it differently here.
they definitely played it differently. I believe, like in the game, like as I'm thinking about it, I feel like it had to have happened. No, it definitely happened. I think before she found out, but that doesn't matter. Let's move on because we're already 14 minutes in. But next week we jump to the next year on her birthday, and we get the museum scene. Starting with them finding a T Rex statue in the
Mhm,
middle of a forested over area that presumably wasn't a forest 20 years
mhm,
prior. Um, and her climbing up the dinosaur, um, get on top saying I'm on a freaking dinosaur and all that. Just like the
mhm.
game, this whole scene, another one of those things where it's like you don't change anything,
Yeah,
and the set looks just like the game.
it
Um,
does.
is another one of those scenes that you just don't need to change. It was perfect the way it is. Adding
Mhm,
more would just ultimately take away from it. And I meant to mention this when we were talking about Dina finding out that Ellie's immune, but this is something I mean you talked about off podcast. But whenever the show makes a change or adds something new, it's to enhance certain elements of the story, not completely change it. So whenever
right,
they don't change something, they know that trying to change it would only overcomplicate it and lessen its impact. And this is one of those
right.
moments.
Mhm. The entire museum sequence, was almost beat for beat, like, them just going throughout the different exhibits, the planets, um, and, of course, the entire space launch thing, like, that was exactly the same.
Yeah, and they talked about
Um,
in the making of how just being a kid and having like your parent or guardian or someone in your life take a genuine interest in the things that you like and do something like this. It's really special, and you could tell how much he loved this girl.
yeah, and how much he loved seeing how happy she was, how much joy she felt in
Mhm.
that moment. You could tell, like, he was crying. Like, it was a again, like, you don't change that moment.
Yeah, I think the only
At
thing that's different is that there was like a brief encounter with an infected in this, but that's because again, it's a game. There needed to be a little bit of something, some gameplay, but that's not necessary in this. So that's cut out.
right. But the one difference is how they end it. They both it's the same narrative beat, but in the game, they finish going to space. Metaphorically, they finish going to space and launching off, and um, they're leaving out of the museum, and Ellie sees a Firefly logo
Mm.
on the museum wall in the game, and like Joel sees it too. It's kind of like a pause moment of just some energy is felt in the room, and then they walk and keep on going about their day.
But in this one,
In the
she,
show, it's
yeah, go ahead.
in the show, it's different. Like it's very different because they're already out of the museum and they're walking away and like heading back to Jackson. And Ellie stops behind for a minute while they're walking in the forest. And Joel's like, "Hey, is everything good?" And Ellie's like, "Oh yeah, everything's fine." And then the camera pans over and you see fireflies
Yeah,
like
actual,
flying,
yeah, like actual lightning
like actual,
bugs.
yeah, which I feel like was a very interesting way of doing it instead of it just being a literal Firefly logo. They were just like, what
Hmm.
if we have lightning bugs and have that and have Joel be oblivious? Which again, Joel being oblivious is kind of a running gag, but Joel saying like, "I see the way you look at Jesse," which was in the game too. But um, yeah, just a lot of the episode being about Joel being the father he thinks he is, and Ellie being the daughter she thinks she is, which I think plays into the next flashback.
Yeah, for sure. And then in the next flashback, we get, uh, Joel once again. He's got a cake. He's taking it up to Ellie's room, and he catches Ellie smoking weed, getting a tattoo, and messing with a girl all at once. And
Right,
it just it all catches him off guard, and he gets upset.
right.
He kicks out the girl who kept like talking, and I'm like, no, you need to leave. Why are you trying to speak? Leave. And he's upset. Like,
Mhm,
hey, she's only, I think at this point she's 17. No,
mhm.
she's 16, and she's like, hey, she's 16, and she goes, yeah, and I'm 19, and he's like, oh, well, get out.
Oh,
And he's like,
high five.
and it's just a conversation about, well, that age difference today would be weird. In the apocalypse, I feel like the apocalypse things like regress a bit, and it's like, that
Yeah,
age
they're
that
just
age
like, yeah,
difference is a bit different because you have to just mature older in the apocalypse. So that three
right,
age
right.
age gap and the whole being legal at 18 thing is just probably different then. And to me, it's not as weird as I think it would be today.
But
um,
Joel wasn't having it
yeah,
though.
Joel was not
He
having
was
it.
like,
He's from, and that also gets into a bit of a discussion that was being had online around the time this episode came out, which was about whether or not Joel is homophobic based on how he reacted to Ellie messing around with the girl, where he says experimenting with girls, and Ellie says it's not an experiment. And
yeah,
a lot of people are taking very two extreme sides of he's either homophobic or he's not. When the truth, like everything in this show, lies in between. There's a gray area. And the
yeah.
reality is, Joel is an old man in a world that went to hell in 2003. It makes
Oh, and he,
sense for him to be a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of a same sex couple, but that doesn't
yeah,
mean he's intolerant. Even,
mhm,
allies today can have flashes of homophobia because of how deeply rooted it is in our
mhm,
society. And, as we talked about, with the last flashback, Joel loves his daughter, and, he very quickly
mhm,
gets used to the fact that she's gay.
right. And it's just mm, like one, yeah, everything you're saying, like him being an old man raised in Texas, and the world went to garbage in 2003. Um, yeah, like he, there would be some foresight missing from him there. And also, I do think that also I wonder where Bill and Frank play into that as well. Um, but yeah, overall, the way that that scene was played, I read it as him like just being oblivious Like he just doesn't know what he doesn't know.
Hmm.
In the way that it was played, because he's just like he genuinely is just on another planet, and he thinks that he knows Ellie, and that she also, it plays into that moment where he's like, "This is my house, and you follow my rules," and she's like, "It's the apocalypse. Like this is not your house. They gave it to you. Like we are in a town in a wall. Like you know the person who runs this town. You're the owner of this town's brother. Like they gave you this house. They
Yeah.
gave it to us." And I feel like that was a reality check for Joel, because Joel is trying to parent Ellie like he parented Sarah, and is like, though you're like my dad, like we're not blood in a traditional sense. And also, like, even though you are a parental figure in my life, you don't know me as well as you think you do. And I feel like that was a very like key point of the episode. Even with Joel saying, like, I see the way you look at Jesse.
Hmm.
Like Joel is just very out of his element. Um, and he he says stuff with confidence. I
Yeah.
mean, like one of the things is like, "You're not acting like yourself. This isn't you." Like that was one of the lines that Joel was using, and yeah, I feel like that was an interesting moment in the episode, because he and it's not just, I mean, of course, it's normal parenting stuff of like parents not grasping their kids growing older, but Joel also doesn't think that Ellie sees through his lies.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't see that. He thinks of her being naive a bit and still falling and being okay with all of his lies. Which plays into the next flashback.
Yeah. And then we get the flashback that we've been waiting for, learning how and why Joel killed Eugene, the therapist, Gail's husband. And it's once again Ellie's birthday. She's 17 now, and she's going on her first patrol with Joel. And on their patrol, they come across Eugene and his patrol partner having been attacked by infected. His patrol partner's dead, and Eugene was bit. And as we assumed, that's why Joel had to kill him. But here, he wants to go back to Jackson. He wants to see his wife, have his final words. But Joel is like, "There's protocol. You're infected. You could come back, turn, infect the town. We got to kill you right here and now. You know this." And he tries to talk him down. And what's this guy's name? Joey Pants.
Yeah, Drew.
Joey Pantanoella, or Pantanoella or something like that. Yeah, he, I recognize his face. He's just a guy that is in a lot of things. I mostly know him
Character.
from Matrix.
Yeah,
um,
same.
yeah, and yeah, he's awesome. And this brief period he's in the show, he's awesome. Um, and yeah, uh, Ellie kind of convinces Joel, and Joel's like, "Okay, well, go back and get the horses. We'll take him back to town. We'll tie him up, keep him from biting us." And of course, he lies. He takes Eugene to a lake. Eugene's like, "I don't need a view. I just want to see my wife." And Joel's like, "You know the rules, man. Can't take you back. But if you love someone, you can always see him." So he stops. He thinks. He says, "I can see her." Joel shoots him. Ellie comes out and then catches him in the act. And then they drag his body back to the town. And Joel spins a tale about how brave Eugene was and how he took his own life because he didn't want to infect anybody, and how he said that he loved her despite the fact that that was none of it. No, that wasn't what happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Ellie's over it because Ellie's just like, no, this is her realizing, oh, he lied to me.
Uh-huh.
And she tells the truth. She tells Gail, no, he shot him in the head. He wanted to come back and talk to you, but he didn't. And but Joel didn't want him to because whatever, and he shot him in the head. And of course, Gail's upset, and we know more about that based on what she said to him in their therapy session in the first episode. Um,
Right.
but yeah, and then she says specifically, "You swore," and then walks
Which is
away,
like,
which isn't what he
and
he didn't swear. He promised.
Mhm.
But what he did
Yeah.
swear about was he swore about what happened at Salt Lake City. And that's what she was
Mhm.
referencing. She wasn't referencing his lie just then. She was referencing his lie several years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Which I thought that mm, basing the reveal that Joel lied around Joel's tendencies as a liar was way more effective than Ellie just magically going to Salt Lake.
Yeah, because it's like,
Um,
how far away is Salt Lake City? Like she just goes all the way to Salt Lake City
yeah,
and
and
does
then
that. Like,
Joel's like, "We've been worried about you. Where did you go?" Like she went on a whole expedition in the game. But here, yeah, it's just yeah, once he hears Joel spin that tale, Ellie immediately recognizes the cadences, the tone of voice, because it's everything that he said before. He's like, there's plenty of other immune people out there. The doctors tried, and it
okay.
just nothing worked. And Ellie, it's the same exact tone he
Mhm.
used. Um, yeah, I feel like that Ellie saying you swore, that was way more effective for me. And it made what Joel did and Joel's behavior even more just seedy.
But also
Because
in
it's
that
just like
moment,
you're
it's also
yeah.
like, I get she was upset, but she shouldn't have done that. She should have
Mm,
let Gail live with the lie and confronted Joel later. Um,
mm,
but in that moment, she just wanted to hurt him, and she knew that Gail finding out would hurt him without any regard about how it would hurt Gail.
uh-huh.
And also kind of just probably a childish thought of, well, he lied, and I'm not gonna lie, even if it hurts her. Despite the fact
Right.
that there are some cases like that where the lie is arguably better, and she would have been better off, living her life thinking that he died heroically. You know, but Ellie's anger just overtook her, and she wanted to hurt Joel. And then
Because
we
again,
we get into the final flashback of this episode, and what is the final flashback of the game. And I don't think any of us expected it to happen this early. Like, even
at
knowing
all.
that this was a full flashback episode, I think once I realized this was a full flashback episode, I thought it might happen, but I wasn't certain.
Mm,
But definitely before this episode, I didn't think it was going to happen at all this season. I thought it was going to be the end of the next season, like they did in the game. But as soon as,
right. I thought it would be last season, like
yeah,
the last episode.
but once you start watching this episode, you realize, oh, we might get that flashback,
Right.
and we
Yeah.
do. Ellie in episode 3 lied and said that the last time she saw Joel was the night. Well, I guess technically she didn't lie, because I don't know if she said it was the night of the party or if it was at the party specifically. But I think in
Right.
that scene, it was like she was lying, so I think it had to be specifically at the party. And she lied, and she didn't. That wasn't the last time she saw him. She went back home and she talked to him on a porch, and we get another almost perfect recreation of a scene from the game. There's a few
Yeah.
line changes here and there that are kind
Yes.
of subtle, but nothing drastic. And it is basically exactly how it goes down in the game.
I mean, yeah, first starting on what you were saying about the fact that this is the last scene of the game basically.
I guess we should probably. I guess I was gonna do it, but my brain was thinking
Okay.
we should probably set up the context of the scene in general. But yeah, and in this
Yeah.
scene, this is Ellie kind of essentially beginning the process of forgiving Joel
Right.
on the night before he dies, which makes it very, very gut wrenching and heart wrenching, and making his death feel even worse when you find out that
Yeah.
they were on the road to recovering their relationship. But yeah, go ahead. What were you
And
gonna
it
say?
makes oh yeah, and it makes all of Ellie's anger and how out of character she was makes sense. Because it's not just, oh, the fact that he was killed, it was the fact that we were mending and we were on the process of recovery and it was taken away from her. Um, I feel like that was like a very key part of Ellie's arc in the game. And I feel like doing it earlier. I don't think it makes the story worse, but I just think they're telling a different story here. Um, yeah, I wasn't as the episode went on, I was like, "Oh, we're gonna get this scene. We're getting the porch scene most likely." But yeah, I thought it was just very different.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I think overall the line changes were just one, Joel saying "I love you." That was not in the game at all. Like Joel saying "I love you." Um, and of course Joel saying like "I hope you're a little better than me."
Yeah.
Like Joel saying all of that stuff that was not in the game at all. But I feel like within the narrative that they weaved here, they added extra context there. Also, Ellie saying you're selfish. That wasn't in there either. It was mainly just like Joel saying I'll do it all over again, and then Ellie says I don't think I can forgive you for that. But Ellie calls Joel selfish.
Hmm.
Um, but overall, line for line, is virtually the same.
Yeah.
Um,
And in the making of at the end of the episode, um, Druckmann talks about how he showed this scene to Craig Mazin while the second game was in production, and at that point in time, they were already like in the process of getting the show off the ground with Craig Mazin on board, um, to work on the show in some capacity, which was very surprising to me to know that this show was in the works that early, that it was in the works
yeah.
like in between 2013 and 2020, sometime in
Mhm.
between then when they were working on the second game,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
yeah, that's insane that they've been working on this for that long. But it makes sense with how big of a hit the first game was and the fact that it revolutionized the way people tell stories in games. That they'd immediately be like, we got to turn this into a show or a movie. I bet it probably was supposed to be a movie back then before it became a
Yeah. It
show.
was. It was right. Yeah. It was a movie for a bit. Like they were talking about making it a movie like 2015, 2016. They've been trying, but it was just like I felt like it was just in production hell.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like we might have touched on it in the first episode when we were talking about early season two, but Caitlin Deaver was supposed to be Ellie.
Mm.
Yeah, Caitlin Deaver was supposed to be Ellie in the film The Last of Us,
Oh wow.
and yeah, they pivoted into making it a show, and at that point, Caitlin Deaver aged out of the role, so she just wasn't really in consideration for Ellie anymore. But once Ellie came up, or once Abby came up, I mean, that's when they decided to make Abby be played by Caitlin Deaver. Also, her playing Cassie, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So yeah, Caitlin Deaver was initially supposed to be Ellie in the Last of Us movie, but I
But yeah,
think them opting for television worked way better.
yeah, definitely. I think most games are better off as shows, honestly. There are very few
Yeah.
that I think would be better off as movies. But me and you have talked about, how much we love the game, but it didn't really make sense. And big spoiler for literally the very ending of Last of Us Part Two, the video game,
Mhm.
which in turn will spoil the show. But we talked about how as much as we love the game, we didn't think it really made a lot of sense for Ellie not to kill Abby after all she went through and sacrifice to get to her at the very end. Um, but the only thing that made it make even a sliver of sense was that flashback. So
Mhm.
I'm curious, how will they do it now?
Oof.
But at the same time,
Good
this
luck.
does give them the opportunity to just do the ending much better.
Right. But
And when we
yeah,
talk about episode 7, we'll be able to really get into, okay, based on the changes they made with the character, how how are they going to change things? But what were you gonna say?
but yeah, like good luck. I'm interested because that flashback did a lot of heavy lifting in the game, and I feel like there was a lot of transphobia and homophobia in regards to the response of Last of Us Part Two. In regards to just the reception of Abby and Ellie in the game. It was a lot of weird stuff,
Mhm.
especially in regards to like Laura Bailey being attacked. It was a lot of weird behavior in regards to it.
Which is
But I
weird
feel like,
because I'm sure
yeah,
there probably was some like transphobia towards what was it, Liv? Was the character's name?
yeah,
Um
Lev, yeah,
but I feel like yeah, Lev, but I feel like most of it was probably more of it was put on the on Abby, who is a cisgendered woman,
yeah,
than the transgender guy in the game, which is insane.
exactly,
Because
which is wild.
people are more obsessed with, you know, how
Mhm.
how much you pass for a certain
Right,
gender than they are whether or not you actually identify as that gender.
right, yeah, like so much of the conversation in regards to the game. It was a lot. So much of the internet discourse and conversation in regards to the game was just so warped by post Gamergate nonsense. Um, but I've and on top of that, I feel like with the criticisms towards The Last of Us Part Two, because the game was so long and because it was such
Unnecessarily long.
yeah, it was so
I
very long.
like I struggle to think of some of the things that happened. Like there's so many sections of all of these days in Seattle that I'm like I don't remember because it's too much. That game should have been like 5 hours shorter than it actually was.
Exactly. Like, and then there's like another 3 hours dedicated to the Rattlers and all. It's just so
See,
much.
the thing about that is the game that is like one of the best gameplay segments of the game.
It is good
From
gameplay,
a
but it's like,
gameplay perspective, it's great, but from a narrative perspective, it starts to get weird.
yeah, because it's like the narrative screeches to a halt, and I'm like, I thought we were at the end. But yeah, the game is so long that that payoff of the flashback, so many people didn't get to that point, and a lot of people's patience was worn thin. Because they're like, you're making me play as a character that killed my favorite character. I don't want to touch this game. And like they played through the first few hours and they're like, this game is too long. And they just didn't finish it. So I feel like the flashback did a lot of heavy lifting in regards to making the story make sense. So however they're gonna do it in the show, I don't they gotta write some like Sopranos level television if they want to make this work.
But yeah, we'll get into that as we discuss episode 7 because they do some different things with some yeah some I was gonna say subtle, but Ellie's such a different character. It's not really subtle. That kind of just will make you think of like, okay, how are they gonna justify her going back, and then how are they gonna justify her not just killing Abby? So getting into the season 2 finale of The Last of Us, episode 7, Seattle Day 3. Following up on the events of the flashback, you know, learning that Ellie had her final moments with Joel, we go back to her after the events of her torturing um, Nora, back to the theater, meeting up with Jesse and Dina. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong about this being where it happens, but I believe this is where Ellie tells Dina that like what Joel did to warrant his death was at the very beginning of the episode.
Hmm. It was at the very beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
it,
the or at the very, very beginning, it was Jesse was taking the arrow out of Dina's leg.
yes,
And then we like after the title card, I think, and immediately it's the scene where Ellie tells Dina.
yeah, and as to be expected, uh, after Dina finds out, what happens, she's like, yeah, no, we gotta cut this out because Dina stated in episode 5, um, she found her family dead, her mother and sister murdered by a random man, but she was able to kill him. And the reason she justifies going on this revenge trip with Ellie is because she knows that if she didn't catch the man who killed her family in the act and murder him herself, she would have hunted him down to the ends of the earth. But now knowing that
Right.
Joel did the same
Mhm.
thing to someone else, she understands why that person did what they did, and she no longer thinks it's worth pursuing revenge. On top of course, all of the danger that they're in, and them potentially, you know, getting killed in the process. After her, getting an arrow pulled out of her leg or pushed through her leg, actually, um, by Jesse.
Yeah.
Yeah, what were your thoughts
Which,
about Dina's reaction?
hmm, I think it was interesting because Dina's kind of paraphrase. It was almost like, I'm down for vengeance, but this is different. Um, in Dina's eyes, what Ellie was doing was immediately justified because from her perspective, she is like, wow, Ellie just lost her dad. Like, we should take care of business. We should do what we got to do in Seattle. And like, she was very ride or die, and she cross applied it to her experience. But Dina realizes that her experience is very different from Ellie's, and that, yeah, what Joel did is innately foul,
Yeah,
and it's hard to justify it. And or that's a word, justify justice. But I feel like in Dina's head, a moral, it's not the easy B movie plot revenge story that she thought it was. She was like, all right, we're going to Seattle. We're getting the people that killed your father. Not we're getting the people who killed your father after he killed other people's family and prevented humanity from having a cure. Like Joel's situation is so much more heinous and more depraved to an extent. And I feel like that moment is Dina realizing that it's not just revenge. There's layers of hurt involved in this, and it's bigger than her understanding. Which plays into perspective and how that plays into the entire story.
absolutely.
But yeah, thought that Dina's response. I thought her response was definitely an interesting response.
Yeah, and from there we get uh, Jesse and Ellie going to go find Tommy, because they decided it's time to leave after talking to Dina. They got to go,
Mm.
and we get some more extended scenes, one-on-one scenes between Ellie and Jesse, where we
Mhm.
simultaneously see how different and the same this Ellie is in comparison to her game counterpart. Game Ellie
Right.
wouldn't have attempted to lift a finger to save a Seraphite like she does in this episode. Jesse and Ellie,
Yeah.
are sneaking around trying to get to a rendezvous point to meet up with Tommy, and they run across wolves. So they run and hide, and it turns out that the wolves are chasing down a Seraphite, and that they're going to torture him. And Ellie, jumps into the action to try and stop him, and Jesse holds her back and says, "No, we can't do this." He specifically says, like, I'm not going to die here." And
Mhm.
in the game, Ellie has that same mindset. She's like, "I'm here for a very specific reason." And she's obsessed with that reason. She's obsessed with revenge, and that's what she's there for. She doesn't care about anything else except for that and Dina. So that is
Mhm.
definitely a very different aspect of Ellie that we don't see in the game, because in the show she's a very different character, as we've said before. But then, moving away from that, once they go to the rendezvous point to wait for Tommy, they start to hear gunshots, and they assume, I think they also hear on the radio that it's a sniper. So they assume it's Tommy. They're going to go after Tommy. And in that moment, uh, Ellie sees the aquarium. The aquarium, which uh, which is where Nora told her. Well, she didn't really tell her anything. She just said some vague things relating to an aquarium, and Ellie
Yeah.
Ellie, with the help of Dina, put two and two together, and she can see where the aquarium is now. So now she knows where she needs to go to potentially find Abby. and now she's torn between going to go for revenge, going to go help her uncle, and she chooses revenge, which is much more in line with her in the game. She's obsessed with revenge.
Yeah.
But in the show, especially towards the beginning of this episode, which we glossed over, she voices her regret at having tortured Nora.
Yeah.
She does not have that in the games. She has no regret
At all.
for anything that she does in the game. In the show, though,
Yeah.
she shows some regret. Like, should I have done that? Like, am I becoming as bad as they are? And she, voices those concerns to Dina before, telling her the truth about what Joel did. But here, that revenge just takes over again, and she decides to abandon Jesse ultimately after they just had another heart to heart of many,
Yeah.
in regards to him, knowing what the relationship that Ellie and Dina has. But also, I
Mhm.
guess this is the finale. A lot happened. He also found out that
Yeah.
Dina's pregnant. He kind of just put things together, and Ellie
Right.
confirmed those suspicions of his. And he's
Which is different.
yeah. I don't.
Oh, yeah, which is definitely different in the game because Jesse doesn't know
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't
in the
remember if
game.
he ever finds out. So yeah,
Yeah.
he never knows in the game, and here he learns, which makes what ends up happening later a lot tragic. Which we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
Jesse, in the show overall is, as we learn a lot more about him in this in comparison to the game, he's a very responsible person. He's on the council at only the age of like early 20s or something like that, because he's only a few years older than Ellie and Dina, who are 19. And
Mhm.
he's a pillar of that community, and he even broke the rules to come out there and save Dina and Ellie, alongside Tommy, because he cares about them, Dina more than Ellie. But this episode does show that he does actually care about Ellie. They are good friends, which
Yeah.
which is not as clear how good of friends they are in the game. But I feel like the show makes it a lot more clear. Like, yeah, they're really good friends. He's willing to come out there and save her life. But in this
Right.
moment, he's like, first off, this was stupid what you did. But now I have a kid, and now my kid's life is in danger, and the mother of my child. So we got to get out of here. We got to go get Tommy, and we got to
Right.
go. And in the making of, they kind of like, the whole show, as we keep saying, is about.
Oh yeah, perspective. Yeah.
And in the making of, I forget who exactly said it, but they talk about how, to an extent, I think it was Craig Mason, to an extent, Jesse has no right to kind of like, judge Ellie, because he doesn't understand what she's going through, and he can't impose his way of thinking and his moral compass onto her. But ultimately, what she does is extremely selfish, and
Yes.
she abandons him and her uncle to die. And
Right.
they try to reinforce that in a very weird way that I don't agree with.
I don't know if manipulative is the word to use, but I feel like the scene with the Seraphites or the Seraphite and the
Yeah,
wolves, like in, I feel like that scene was put in there to imply that there is some sort of morality innately in Ellie that Jesse doesn't have, and that Jesse cares so much about the community that he would let random people perish. And I understand that to an extent, but I feel like it does, in a narrative way, kind of give Ellie a bit of justification. Like, I know it's The Last of Us and there's no good and bad people. I feel like I don't know. Ellie Ellie saving the Seraphite kid, like it is like rightful to an extent, but I do think Jesse's perspective is valuable there as well. Because it's like you brought my kid into a war zone. And I feel like for all of Ellie's righteousness, I feel like Ellie's righteousness isn't even righteousness. It's kind of like thinly veiled. It's righteousness or a mask of righteousness to Guy's selfishness. And I feel like that's like a lot of her actions. Like I feel like maybe there is this subtle thing within Ellie to want to protect the little person or to reject authority. But I do think that, sometimes Ellie's character, at least in the show, she can just be very reckless.
Yeah, and I think I,
Which,
I think that
yeah.
unfortunately, to uh, in my opinion, a detriment to the show and the character of Ellie is that to prop up characters like Jesse and Dina and make them more valuable to the story, they kind of they they just make Ellie kind of stupid sometimes and
Yeah.
very naive and
Hmm.
like we've said before, less mature as she is in the show in comparison to the game, but like to a like extreme extent where it's like another thing that Jesse calls out in that moment is that we would have died. It was four of them. They have assault rifles. What do we have? Pistols and bolt action rifles. We would have died. Um, and they kind of like to that scene was also to kind of show that Jesse is a bit more level headed of a person than Ellie is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of conversation online about just how significantly different of a character Ellie is and how that kind of to some people ruins the story that they're trying to tell. Is it an opinion that some people have? But we'll talk more about that towards the end of our discussion. But I want to hear more of your perspective on the scene where like Ellie decides to abandon Jesse and Tommy.
I Her perspective is warped. It's a very warped perspective. Like you can see her pain and like her one, it's not very consistent. And like I do okay, I don't want to say it's not consistent because once she saw the whale and the wheel, like once she saw Nora's hints at the aquarium, she that was everything she needed. So like yeah, I feel like towards the beginning of the episode she did want to leave, but once she saw that it was right there and in the distance and reachable, I don't think she would have been happy with just leaving in that moment. And she was like, "All
Yeah,
right, I'm doing this. This is what I would need to do." Um, um, but still think that Ellie's decision to leave Tommy and Jesse basically die. I do think that it was a foul decision, and that it was rooted in selfishness. Because yeah, Tommy and Jesse came down there to help them get back to Jackson, just for Ellie to dip, just for the sake of satisfying something. Yeah, it's because of the fact that the scene, the fact that Ellie and Joel's last conversation is already shown, it makes some of Ellie's actions even harder to understand or rationalize. Um, I could understand Ellie maybe being upset at Jesse for not voting for them to go
yeah, which
with
was
like more
also
people
a big
and more.
reveal that that happened in the episode
Yeah,
of like he wasn't part of the three people that voted. It was semi confirmed that
yeah,
um, Tommy's wife was one of them. I'm forgetting her name at the moment, and Tommy of course was, but it's revealed that Jesse wasn't that third vote. Maria, I believe.
yeah. Oh yeah, Maria, yeah. But yeah, I feel like in the effort to kind of give some sort of vague justification for Ellie's actions, they try to diminish um, Jesse and Dina a bit. Um, yeah, I don't know, or not Jesse and Dina, but that scene where like Ellie is straight up like bump the community, I don't care. That was when it's a sad moment because Jesse's like I don't I there's nothing I can do at this point.
Yeah, a lot of conversations being had around like they don't go hard enough with Ellie's conviction of revenge, where like
Mhm.
a lot of people like feel like it's so flimsy that it's hard to believe that she really wants it, and that might be what they're going for, but at the same time, should they? Because it's kind of making it, for some people, especially people who have played the game, even some people who haven't played the game, it's kind of just making it feel like there's no true conflict there because it sometimes feels like she doesn't really even want it, and that is kind of like taking some people out of the story a bit.
Which is understandable because one moment she's like, "Yeah, we need to go, we need to go," and then the next moment she's like, "I don't care about the community. Joel was my community. Nothing else matters." Um, but then again, that just doesn't align to her character, especially in a couple episodes before. She's like, "I'm gonna be a dad."
Yeah, she's
It was like
very
one episode.
wishy-washy,
Yeah,
but yeah, they're like purposely trying
absolutely.
to um what's the word, inject a lot of light in the dark, whereas the game is like overwhelmingly dark in this moment, and we don't start getting more light until we get Abby really. um
Right.
and yeah, that I feel like their attempt to keep it from being too dour is kind of negatively affecting the story they're trying to tell, because if it's supposed to be a revenge tale, there's not a lot of revenge happening. Something that a lot of people point out
Yeah.
that I agree with is that there needed to be Ellie's a lot less capable, or as far as we have been shown, she's a lot less capable. So we don't get a moment of her just
Yeah.
going on a murder spree or doing something along those lines that is just like very clearly like she's obsessed. She's not going to stop.
Right.
So by the time it gets
Mhm.
to the end of the episode, it's like, okay, were you really that into it to begin with? Whereas in the game, they show you time and time again as it's a video game, you're murdering a lot of people. She's in this for the long haul.
Yes.
She's doing a lot of messed up stuff to reach this goal. Whereas in the show, we don't really get much of that.
Ellie, in the game, Ellie didn't second guess anything. I feel like I don't want to jump ahead to stuff with Mel, but yeah, I feel like before all the way up to day three, I don't think Ellie regretted a single thing. I mean, even towards the end, like Ellie really didn't regret anything that much. She just kind of was, she was reckless.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I feel like maybe there's a bit of a fear of like the audience completely just not siding with Ellie or just losing Ellie entirely. Um, and they try to still inject some moments of humanity by just saying, well, she did what she did to Nora, but she still feels bad about it.
yeah.
Um,
Which
I
I
feel
think
like,
just makes her a less interesting character because of that. It also makes
yeah,
her a weaker foil to Abby because
yeah,
they no longer work as foils for each other. If Abby does it, unflinchingly and with no mercy, no regrets, or at least not yet. um, until
right,
Ellie comes in and starts murdering people, then she starts to regret it a little bit. But then Ellie is kind of regretting it a lot earlier than she did. The regret I feel like is supposed to come later in a very similar fashion. It's supposed to they're supposed to mirror each other and their respective journeys of revenge, and we'll have to
exactly.
wait till season three to fully see how they handle that. But as of now, based on our foreknowledge from the game, it's hard to tell how they're going to balance that with the version of Ellie that we have in the show. But I want to move on to
Mm,
the Seraphite Islet, because on her way to
yeah,
the aquarium, we have this very weird scene where she crash lands on a Seraphite Island after getting hit by a wave and almost gets hung. And I think that it was completely unnecessary and added nothing, especially since we're just going to get a better version of that scene with Abby in the next season. Haley Gross and Neil Druckmann try to break it down in the making of in a way that makes it make more sense narratively. It's essentially them,
It still didn't work for me.
yeah, it's essentially them trying to show that the path Ellie's on leads to death and giving her the opportunity to give up on revenge, on the revenge quest after being faced directly with that. But, even after almost dying, she still decides, no, I'm still going to go after Abby. It's also them trying to show that the Seraphites are just as bad, as the WLF. But I feel like both of these things have already been shown very well. When we saw,
Yeah.
Ellie and Dino walk into the radio station and we see them hanging, and we know that's the Seraphites. We know they're bad. We know they're bad because we watched one of them gut somebody and hang them. So we know that they're just as bad. And we also know that
And Dina
that
got shot in the
yeah,
leg.
and we know that Ellie's obsessed because she just abandoned her uncle and friend. So like we didn't need this. This did nothing, especially since you can cut that scene out and just have her go straight to the island and you lose nothing.
Yeah.
It feels like it was
Like,
done to fill times. But part of the reason it was done is because it was kind of a reference to a level that they were planning on having in the game, where you did play as Ellie on the Seraphite Island. But like,
yeah.
it's not in the game,
But
and
it was
there's probably a good reason why it wasn't in the
yeah,
game, because it also doesn't work here.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Like it I mean, cool is like, yeah, we have the chance to go back and do story stuff we didn't do in the game. Like, and I understand that mindset from Gross and Stuckman. I said Stuckman.
Druckmann.
Struckman or Druckman. Druckman. I'm so thinking about YouTube. Think about Chris Stuckman. Neil Druckmann. um, I understand Gross and Druckmann's mindset in regards to like, oh, we're gonna put this in as like a nice little nugget because we couldn't do it in the game, but it just didn't work, and it was just kind of weird. And also, like you were saying, the moment with Abby when it happens in the game is such a cool moment because of the fact that we've seen allusions to the Seraphites, but we never really saw how they get down.
Yeah, and I think it's going to hit
And
even
yeah, I
harder
feel like
because we've seen what that is, like what they're going to do. Like we've seen it happen in action. We know what the end result is because we saw those bodies hanging in the radio station. But then we saw it happen in
exactly
action, which we also get that in the game as well. Um, and so
right.
when we see it about to happen to Abby, it's more visceral.
Mhm.
Whereas this time it was
Yeah.
just,
Uh,
I feel like this is going to lessen the impact of that moment for people who haven't played the game. For me, since it's it's one of my favorite parts of the game, that whole scene in the rain, lit by fire, the little fight sequence afterwards, and this is where you meet Lev and
yeah.
uh his sister. I can't remember
Oh,
Lev's sister's
Yara.
name. Yeah, this is where you meet Lev and Yara. So like this is a very iconic sequence in the game that this is, I feel like, gonna lessen the impact of a little bit
Yeah.
for people who haven't played the game, at
And
least.
I
You know,
guess I can understand from you right. And I guess to an extent I can understand they wanted to demonstrate the overlap between they want to demonstrate that on day three that the war is happening on Seraphite Island
but they
too
they
in the
already did that.
background, but still it doesn't work. Exactly, they
They
already
already
did.
did that when they showed all the boats going off to the island. Like this whole scene just
Yeah,
reiterates things that were already made clear. But let's move on
yeah,
to the aquarium
uh, fi-
itself. Um,
yeah.
you know,
Which I think is the best scene in the episode, honestly.
yeah, and the process for getting into the aquarium is just like how you do it in the game. Climbing on top of the building, dropping down. Even the hallways, it's all the exact same. And
Mhm.
yeah, we get the iconic scene of Ellie murdering. Uh, I almost called him Nolan. What is that man's name?
Oh, Owen.
Owen. Owen and Mel. Except
Yeah.
in my memory of the game, it was kind of more in cold blood in the game, whereas here is an accident.
Y- Yeah.
Especially the killing of Mel. Whereas in the game, it was kind of
Yes.
more. It was still reactionary, but it was still like purposeful. Whereas this one, she kind of
Yeah.
just fired, you know, out of, because,
Haphazardly.
yeah, haphazardly, and then, a bullet, uh, not grazed Mel because it, like, it was fatal. And yeah, then she starts to die from it. And they add something to the scene that makes it way more visceral, which is, Mel trying
Ugh.
to like talk Ellie through during a C-section and cutting the baby out of her, because this is, where we find out that Mel is pregnant with Owen's baby. And, of course, Ellie didn't know that before she shot her. And, this is, like I said, iconic scene in the game because it obviously, of course, relates directly back to Dina and the fact that she also has a pregnant partner in this city surrounded by soldiers and religious zealots. And they're in, incredible danger. And this exact same thing that she just did could happen to Dina.
Yeah. Mm. I feel like with this version of the scene, there's a lot of symbolism there. The fact that like when Mel is a doctor, and again, it's like there's so much stressed importance on doctors in the world of The Last of Us. Of course, you got Abby's father. Nora was a doctor and was like tending the people in a hospital, or not a doctor, but she was tending the people in
Yeah.
a hospital. And you have Mel, a doctor. Everything that she knew, all of the knowledge that she had is slowly fading away. And Abby is left not knowing what to really, or not Abby, Ellie is left not knowing what to do at all. I feel like there's that layer there. Quite amazing. He mentioned like at least trying to do her best Joel impression and be like mark on the map in a better match and stuff like that. Like a lot of the same
Yeah.
stuff that Joel would do. Ellie's trying to run an interrogation the way that it should go, but Ellie's a child, or at least in the way that they portray Ellie in the show, she's just more. She is a teen. Um, and yeah, overall, I feel like it's definitely more visceral, and the impact of it is far greater. Like they did it this way with Ellie accidentally killing Mo,
Mm.
because the way that Ellie did it was definitely, like you were saying, is way more in cold blood.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like the way that Ellie does it, Ellie stabs Mel.
Yeah.
Like
That is
it's
true.
brutal how Ellie does it in the game.
Yeah.
Um,
Kind of showing her ruthlessness in the game versus the show. And this is the moment
right.
in, I mean, it's kind of also what they're doing in the show, but this is the moment in the game, especially where she kind of realizes like, okay, I gotta go. Like I can't stay here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
whereas in the show, she has multiple of those moments of maybe I should go. But in the game,
Right.
she was
Exactly. It's so many.
she was pushed to this point of like just murdering these people in cold blood, and they realizing, oh, I just murdered a pregnant lady. And I can never remember if she killed
Mhm.
the dog in the game or not.
She did.
Yeah, they didn't do that in the show because that would have made people
Yeah.
would have hated Ellie. People
Oh,
would
for
have
sure.
hated Ellie, so they were like, "We can't have her kill the dog." If it was up to me, she would
They
have killed
they
that
would
dog.
have they would have yeah.
Um,
They would have wrote it down.
yeah,
Yeah.
they couldn't do that. That would have been too much for the audience. Uh, yeah, this
Yeah.
is the moment in the game where it's like she does a bunch of horrible stuff, then does the worst thing possible, and she's like, "Okay, maybe I've gone too far." And here, I don't know.
Mhm.
For me, the impact is lessened because it's like she's already decided she was going to leave, went back on it, and now she's decided she's going to
Yeah.
leave again. So to me, it's like it's a very good scene. I like the way they did it in this version of the show. I don't dislike it. It just doesn't hit as hard for me
Yeah.
because there was
Yeah.
already a sense of her, giving up almost.
And like not to harp on like, and it's not even a matter of like how they're playing the character. like I don't want to dwell on like, oh well, Ellie is in the game is like more like hardened and mature versus Ellie being more like you were saying, like more of like a firecracker, more of like more definitely like you were saying, a teen to an extent. I feel like that is applicable for sure. And also everything you're saying about her just being more conflicted. There was just I feel like it's like I'm conflicted, and then she goes full in, and then she's conflicted again, and it just kind of makes Ellie frustrating, but not like the good frustrating.
Yeah, I feel like
It almost makes it kind of like,
it's gonna take season three and how they deal with Abby to know whether or not this like version of Ellie works for the story that they're telling. But if Abby's story is like mostly
mhm,
the same, then it's kind of like I don't know. It's not gonna really work for me as much as it did in the game. I also feel like and
yeah,
getting into kind of the last segment of the episode with what I'm about to say. I've mentioned several
uh-huh,
times the difference in how the game tells its story versus the show, which isn't necessarily due to the difference in medium, which is something that Haley Gross actually mentions in the very final making of for the season. Haley Gross, original writer on the game, brings up a point in the final making of that I've been reiterating in every single one of these discussions, and that's the fact that the game takes place from the point of view of the playable character, so we don't see anything that the player character isn't aware of. But that's not something all games do. I mentioned before, I used the example of Uncharted. Uncharted often shows what the villains are doing outside the view of Nate, the main character. So it's not necessarily a thing that is done because it's a video game or because of the show. It's just a difference in how the story is being told. Because the show spends way more time showing other people's perspective, we get less of Ellie's perspective. And I feel like that does give us less of that revenge story as a result. And maybe we would be getting more of it if we spent more time with her. And that is a conversation that I've seen
mm,
people being having online, or I've seen people have online about whether or not it was a good idea to change that perspective and spend so much time showing other people's perspective, especially people point toward Isaac. Like maybe all the Isaac stuff should have been saved for next season, and more of that time should have been used to show
mm,
um, Ellie's journey. Where
right,
and yeah,
cool,
basically all the
yep,
flashbacks should have been more related to Ellie and people surrounding Ellie, or the not flashbacks, different the different perspectives should have been from people surrounding Ellie that are important to Ellie's direct story, versus characters like Isaac who are more related to Abby's story, and maybe that's how that should have been split.
mm. I agree with that. I feel like for this first season being about Ellie, we got a lot of Wolf stuff.
Yeah, I could
Um,
imagine
Even though there's still,
that
yeah,
Isaac flashback rather than being in episode what was that 4. I
uh-huh.
I could imagine it instead being the very beginning of season 3 and working just as well.
Oh, yeah,
But I'm
sure.
sorry, go ahead, I cut you off.
Because it'll provide context, and also good, but yeah, because that'll provide all of the context to why the wolves are there. Um, and again, like I understand, like they want The Last of Us to live in the gray, like playing with gray areas and like who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. So like you can tell they wanted to characterize the wolves as the bad guys, so you can feel bad for the Seraphites to eventually find out what the Seraphites are like. But I don't feel as though they did dive into the war aspect a lot. I feel like if the war was just kind of like this slow rumbling thing throughout the series, and then three or is the payoff, I think that that would have been cool. I
Yeah,
think that that would have worked.
that's essentially how it works in the game, where it's like as Ellie you don't really know what's going on, and you don't learn the
Yeah.
context until you get Abby's story. But the reason Haley
Right.
Gross mentions the difference um, in the way the story is being told in the game versus the show is because Um, we get a lot more Jessie this season, and she uses how being able to see more characters' perspectives allows them to flesh out Jesse way more than they could in the show, and because of that, because we know him a lot better, and as a result, like him a lot better, his death hits like a ton of bricks. Whereas in the game,
Yeah.
it's shocking, but it like you don't care necessarily. Like it's shocking,
Yeah.
but I don't care about Jesse necessarily in the game. Um,
Yeah.
but
Because,
here I care about Jesse. So when it happens, I'm like, and I know it's gonna happen. I'm like, oh, it's gonna suck when this guy dies because this guy's awesome.
yeah. And I think Jesse was a bright spot of the season. Um, and even though at some points it did feel like the scene with the Seraphite kid seemed a bit forced. I do think that, but I do think that a lot of the characterization with Jesse overall was very well done. Like even outside of the finale, I think the characterization from the start of the season, it was very interesting, and I think that Jesse and Ellie were very interesting foils in regards to Ellie just kind of going off of instinct, just
Yeah,
just not really thinking about due process or anything like that, and just wanting to go, and Jesse thinking about community, thinking about and putting others first.
yeah, that's
It's a
very true. There were
very
foils to Ellie in two very different ways. Dina in the way of like kind of like tackling the process of seeking this revenge, whereas Ellie was being reckless. Dina was trying to make sure that she got it done right, and then with Jesse, it was a matter of responsibility and what needs to be done versus
exactly,
versus what you want.
and I thought, right, and I thought that Jesse and Dina having more characterization, I did enjoy that aspect a ton. Um, yeah, that was, I would say that's the stuff that I enjoyed the most in the season.
But yeah, this very last scene um, is the break point in the game before we switch perspective,
Yeah,
and like various other scenes this season and the first, it is they didn't change anything because this wasn't a scene that needed to be changed. Even the way that Jesse died was the exact same. He runs in, gets shot in the face. Um,
yeah,
Hole is in the exact same spot. He got shot in the exact same spot. It's all the exact same. And we're left with presumably somebody getting shot. We don't know who. Um, and then it flashes to it flashes back to day one of Seattle, but from Abby's perspective, and we see for the first time the WLF base, the stadium,
mhm,
which looks incredible.
yeah.
I'm excited
That
to
was that
see.
was another thing straight.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what that like the actual like sets that they use to show very specific parts of that stadium looks like in the show, because the sets have been incredible in the show this season. Next season I'm sure it's going to be just as good if not better.
Yeah, and, and speaking of that, visually this episode was great. I do think that the entire set piece of Ellie traveling to the
Oh yeah,
aquarium on the sea,
that's worth talking
the
about.
rain, that was great. I think visually it's definitely one of the best episodes of the
Yeah, and
series. Like it's great looking.
the way they filmed it was incredible as well.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I feel like
if you guys aren't watching the making ofs at the end of these episodes, you should.
yeah, stick around for
Yes,
this.
skip over the
Yeah.
preview. Skip over the preview. Go to the making ofs, and they also post the making ofs on HBO Max, which they changed the name back. Thank God. Um, they post the making of separately as well.
Yeah.
They're definitely
And,
worth
and
checking out
yeah,
just to
visual.
get more knowledge on just what they're going for in terms of the story, but also just the production as a whole, and seeing how they used some practical water combined with blue and green screens to shoot that scene is it's incredible. Like you said, that was a very very beautiful sequence, especially the wide shot where it's her going across the ocean and you see the entirety of like Seattle skyline in the back. Oh, it was gorgeous, and the lightning
That
striking at
was
moments,
crazy.
like lighting up the buildings.
Yeah,
Oh, it was beautiful.
yeah. That was yeah. And that, I know exactly what shot you're talking about. It reminded me of some of the visual effect shots from the first season, like the ending of the first episode of the first season. Like those
Yeah,
wide shots of the environments. Those shots are great. And yeah, this one was no different. The mix between just doing practical water stuff, mixed with blue screen, mixed with having some practical on-set stuff too, like on location. I thought that it was just it was visually well done.
yeah. I was gonna say, I feel like we've been the most negative on the show than we ever have this episode, but this finale is kind of just a bunch of things laid on top of each other over the course of the season that kind of like piled up to have us kind of like just look back on it and think that's kind of weird. But ultimately, I think
Yeah,
I can speak for us both. We're like, we liked it. It was good. It's different, and different isn't bad, but it's also not. It's
yeah,
not completely different. Well, at least completely different. We've had that discussion, but ultimately, the story is still going in a very similar direction, and it's good. It's definitely not bad. I always suggest no, I can't.
yeah,
I can't in my soul really suggest playing the game anymore because Druckmann's a Zionist, and I just can't. I can't encourage people to support him. But
yeah,
if you want to play the game, play the game. But I played the game. It is one of my favorite games. But I can't encourage you to play the game. I just can't bring myself to do it
yeah,
anymore. So that's your decision. Do what you want. But it
yeah.
is
Do what you will with that information.
yeah.
Yeah.
But any final
Um,
thoughts
yeah.
before you wrap up?
Overall, I wouldn't say it was as tight as a season as season one,
Yeah, I mean,
but then again, of course not. Like
especially since
season one
it was an uphill
was
battle with the divisiveness of the part two of the game itself.
right. Like part two was already a polarizing story. And some of the story beats in that game people either agree on or disagree on. And there's not really that much of a middle ground there. Yeah. Don't think it's as tight as season one, but I think considering the source material that it's still a solid season of well made television. And I do think it's a landmark for video game adaptation and adaptation of any source material. I feel like just the involvement from Gross and Druckmann, Jason's love of the material, and television as a medium, it creates something very interesting.
Yeah,
Even if I don't agree with some of the story beats, I think that as a concept, it is just a very interesting show to watch.
it's been shown time and time again now with the good adaptations that we're getting. When you have people who actually know the source material and are passionate about the source material, you tend to get a better adaptation. With The Last of Us, you have Craig Mazin who loves the games. With Fallout, you have people who love the games making that show. With the Castlevania animated series, you have people who love the games making that show. With Arcane, you have the people who make the games making that show. So of course that was going to be good.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, when you have people who actually enjoy the source material making the show, and if you can also have on top of that stuff like Haley Gross and Neil Druckmann, like Raiders on the game, also either also writing on the show like they are, or consulting in some form or fashion, you're going to get something incredible.
Mhm.
You're going to get something that the people who play the game enjoy, and that new people who haven't played the games or who care less about the games will also enjoy.
Yeah. I can't reasonably say that this was a bad season of
Not at all.
television. I feel like that's very reductionist. Do I agree with all of the narrative decisions? No. I mean, even with less like the game, there is some pacing issues, I
Oh yeah,
believe, and just some plot structure issues that are kind of just not my favorite. But I cannot say that this is a bad season of television from a writing perspective, a performance perspective. I thought that it was a solid season of television.
yeah.
That also happened to follow one of the best seasons of television in the past few years, or like a debut season for a show.
Mhm.
Um, so it had tough competition.
Yeah, for sure. you can even argue that this second season had the opposite problem of the game, where it maybe rushed things a bit too much, where the show dragged a bit too much. But I feel like the show dragged more in Abby's story than it did in Ellie's. So we'll see if they drag in season three. But
Right.
to wrap things up, you know, you let
Mhm.
people know, where they can find you.
Yeah. You can find me at underscore Black Norma underscore. So you can find anything that I'm working on at the time. And yeah, more things to come. And
Great.
thank you for having me. It was very cool.